Hello, I'm Pastor Jacob, and I'm here with a friend of mine, Jillian Kesner, and we're going to talk a little bit about your life and your journey, about how God has just done some really incredible things over the past 8 weeks, but really, God has been building up to that for several months and even years. And so you're one of the many stories here at the church at Martinsburg, and we're really grateful for what God's doing in your life. And really, your story will tell other stories as well, as we really hear a little bit from you about what God has been doing. So with that said, tell us a little bit about what God's been doing in you over the last year, and how that relates to life, transition, work. I mean, you're at such a unique place. You've gotten out of school recently, got a job, and lots of money, I imagine, and lots of different things to consider. So tell us a little bit about yourself.
I graduated from Shepherd University in 2008 and went immediately into a job at the Journal in Martinsburg, and then back last fall got a job at Shepherd University in the public relations office. So that was a good step for security and job security and everything. And but things with finances were kind of all over the place because nothing was ever, didn't really have a strict budget in line, and that was kind of stressful.
And so in journalism, I mean, you could make lots of money if you're super successful, but just starting out, I mean, it's what type of job is it just starting out?
Around 25 probably.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, so enough to meet your needs, but not enough to set you up for the rest of your life.
Right. Yeah, and I would freelance to supplement that too, so that would help with extra things that would come up. So that was nice. So it's nice to have that flexibility in that sort of job market. And I still do that now that I'm working at Shepherd as well. So started working at Shepherd back in November, and then back in July, it was kind of reaching, well, are we going to...
Yeah. So tell us how, because I think we can stop and he can put it back together.
Well, sure.
So tell us how you came to be a part of the church at Martinsburg, and that whole transition of jobs and graduation and everything flowing, in a totally new direction for you. How did you get connected to the church at Martinsburg, and what was that process like for you?
Okay. Last September, I had moved back to Martinsburg on my own and was looking for a new church, and just wasn't feeling like I was getting plugged in where I was, and wanted to be more involved, and was able to connect with the church on Twitter, which was kind of fun. I'm a big advocate of Twitter, even though some people don't care for it all the time, but I think it's been a really neat networking tool for me. And so that was back in September, October, when I moved back into town and started to get more involved in things with the kids ministry and greeting, and just wherever I could kind of fill in and help out as needed. And
Yeah, okay. So you got plugged into a church. You had this new job. Or actually, when we first got to know each other, you were still working at the Journal, and you were rallying some people around you. Pray for me. I've got this potential opportunity at Shepherd. It was kind of an exciting time for you, and we all prayed, and the Lord opened the door, and you went and took that step. But it wasn't a major change in financial position for you.
probably only less than $3,000 more,
Yeah.
probably.
But long term, it provided you with a position that you really would like to be in.
Right.
To grow, develop, and really to make an impact in the field that you're most interested in.
Right. It was a good opportunity in terms of job security, and also my hours were more structured than it was. So it was more conducive for my lifestyle, I guess, in a lot of ways. And it opened up a door that I would have normally had on campus, since before I was just kind of, I visited, and this kind of put me back on campus in a role where I was able to meet people and get to know them, and work in the administrative building where a lot of decisions are made in that building. So that was exciting.
Well, good. So we recognize, and we talk at our church a lot about how God has placed us where we are for a specific reason, and it would have been a perfect fit for you had you gone to Shepherd and made $40,000, $50,000, $60,000 a year, because you could have wiped out all kinds of debt that you had previously. But God opened up a door for you in a job that you really desired, but it wasn't the answer to some financial problems you had, but you went ahead and took it anyway, in light of, I guess, a position at the Journal that could have opened up at some point, but Shepherd was a more stable position, a little bit more money, but not the promise of, making lots of money
Right.
within the next few years. So you've got a new job, enough money to meet your needs, but you've also got a growing awareness and kind of nagging, in your own self that I've got some debts in my life that really are weighing me down. Tell us a little bit about that process, because you and I share a similar story. Mine started in, well, I guess July of 1980 when I was born, but it really came to a head in January of 2006 when Lindsay and I were going through some of this stuff. But when did you know that my financial life is kind of spinning out of control? I'm a pastor's kid. I've learned about money. I've learned about debt. I've learned about tithing, but I'm a college grad. I've got a full-time job, and I can't get a hold of things.
I felt like no matter how much I tried to grow the debt and how much I tried to make an impact on the debt, and it wasn't a whole lot, but it was enough that it was a burden in the sense that making what I make, it was hard to, make a huge impact on that month to month. So it was like I was just chiseling slowly at it, but never seeing any results or any sort of impact, that it was getting smaller. And it wasn't getting much bigger, but it was just kind of like it had reached that balloon. It was just kind of had swollen up. And
it was bigger than you are, and it was bigger than your shovel, and so
Right.
you couldn't get out of the hole.
Right. So even trying to freelance and trying to make extra money on the side just wasn't making any sort of impact. And it was mentally, it was a huge burden, because it consumed me all the time. Like, I was always thinking, I've got to get this taken care of. I couldn't move on any further unless I got that taken care of first.
So I would imagine you probably lost some sleep over all this?
Yeah.
I know I did. It was something that I've shared with you, Lindsay and I went through, and it was just like that constant pressure.
Mm-hmm.
You couldn't, and no matter how many times you lay the bills out, it's just like they just continue to grow, and you just can't get a handle. Now, this is interesting. We'll rewind a little bit. Your dad's a pastor. Growing up, you grew up with a strong understanding of who Christ is and how Christ reigns over all of our life. But tell us how coming up to this really point of, I would almost say, deliverance. I mean, God's just given you, there's a totally different Jillian we're talking to today than we did several weeks ago. But what was your perspective, I guess, leading up to this point of Jesus, money, tithing, the relationship of debt and a Christian? I mean, what was your idea of all those things?
My parents, despite their best intentions, I don't think they had set a good example in terms of setting up a good system to pay off their debts, because we'd had a rough patch with moving and jobs and placement and everything. So not a really strict budget, or it was kind of like they were swimming in debt too. But tithing was always a focus, and my mom tells me still to this day that that's always first. Yeah. And of course, sometimes when you're starting out, that sometimes gets put to the side, which was the case for me as well. But that was another burden that I knew that I needed to address that too, and I knew that I had enough that I needed to just, discipline was going to be the major factor in taking care of debts and doing what I felt the call to obedience for too.
Yeah, and so your mom and your dad from a very early age instilled in you that our first fruits, or what we get first, belongs to the Lord, so we give to Him. But you said just starting out, that's one of those things that you kind of just let slide and deal with these things that I have.
Right. Well, and I was trying to make it a priority, but sometimes I was like, well, I've got this over here that has to be paid.
Right.
So it was just a matter of sometimes having to decide. But then I knew at the same time that, like, I know there's enough there. I just needed to.
So it was almost like you had this debt that created a sense of guilt and overwhelmed you, and then you knew from your upbringing you had this spiritual obligation as a Christian to honor the Lord in your finances and give generously. But because this other, obligations in front of you, that it kind of pushed, your sacrificial giving to the Lord out, and that in itself induced and brought on some guilt. So it was almost like guilt from both sides, like, how do I get out of this? So really it created a perfect storm for you to say, I'm lost, I don't know what to do with this.
Well, there was also the desire to give more, but being in a place that I really felt like I couldn't give more, even when I wanted to. So.
Yeah, because we have a friend who's starting up a nonprofit, and you're really interested in being involved and making a significant impact in what what he's doing and what he feels like God's calling him to do. But to some degree, previous to this point, you've been limited in your ability to give faithfully and sacrificially to your local church, but also elsewhere. But let's talk about that whole turnaround, because you're not at that place anymore. I mean, you're not on the other side where it's all cleaned up, but you've got a plan together. And so let's talk for a minute about that. You called me, or maybe I called you, I don't remember, but we're talking about something, and somehow debt came up, and I know I've been very open about my story and Lindsay's story, and how getting out of debt almost became an idol for us, and we had to submit that to the Lord itself. But we talked, and you had been asking for help. You'd been seeking, some guidance and some direction from other people to really try to figure out, how do I do this? Well, we got together, and I said, Jillian, I think this can work. What was your first thought?
I was really nervous going into the whole thing. I think it was because I came with everything on paper, all the financial statements, and it was a level of being vulnerable to a point, but also knowing that it was one of the only ways I was ever gonna get beyond the current situation. And so, despite the nervousness, it was also kind of a liberating, exciting feeling too, to know that this could be the first step in a journey.
Right. And, I kind of can identify with that, but I didn't sit down with my pastor the very first time,
Right.
Lindsay and I set it all out, but you did, and that was, it's a risky endeavor. Number one, to talk to a pastor about money, because, pastors, all they want is more money, right? But that's not the case with us. I mean, we want to help people be, fit in multiple areas of their life. And so when we sat down that night, or I guess even before that, I told you, here's what we need. We need to look at the whole picture. And that's probably a little scary in itself. And that took some work for you to get everything laid out, but you came over, and what did it look like for you when we laid it all out on that desk?
It was a little overwhelming at first, but and yeah, I mean, there's always that trust level, like you said, with talking to your pastor about it. But I knew going into it that I trusted you enough to know that it wasn't going to be that you weren't going to look and make sure that I was hiding the right amount. So, but no, it was like I said, it was also kind of liberating, because I knew that we were going to set it up in a scale, but from smallest to largest or whatever, and kind of look at the whole picture. But.
And one of the things that was done for us, and I wanted to kind of pass along to you, was to make this whole thing more than just a money deal. It really is an issue and a principle of our spiritual walk. Mm-hmm. And so before we did anything, we put all that stuff aside and we just opened the Bible. And we looked at Paul's words to us in 2 Corinthians, where he said, this is how we're called to give. And, that was something that you innately, because of Christ indwelling you felt that anyway. You
right.
wanted to.
Yeah, there was a huge call of obedience. I felt like to be a good steward, and to be able to tithe, faithfully, and also take care of my debts that have been accumulating. Right.
And so when we started from a spiritual perspective, placing our focus on Christ, it almost brought a peace. And I remember, I don't know if you do, but it was like, okay, Jesus is strong enough to get me out of debt, and not just so I can be out of debt and, I can, carry around my little mini Jesus and say, he did it. But just to know that he's the God that reconciled broken creation with Creator. He certainly can help me put my life in order so it pleases him in every area. So we laid it all out, and we turned the computer on. What happened next?
Well, we laid out all the debts from smallest to largest. Yeah,
we just plugged them into a computer.
Right.
We set up a budget. I mean, it wasn't some crazy complex process.
Yeah. The tithing was first, of course.
Yeah, and I shared that with you because that's where we started. And like you, in the midst of the height of debt that we accumulated, we always gave the first portion to the Lord. And it's interesting, as we've removed debt from our lives, that first portions continue to increase. And we also, like your desire, we've been able to give to other ministries. And so we laid that stuff out. We started with the Lord first. He's primary and central to all of our life. And so we believe that with our finances as well. And then we just kind of went, line by line, from house to power bill and water bill and all those different things. And Then we got a completed picture of everything. All the debts, all your obligations, all the things that you need. And we found out something interesting. You had enough money.
To cover everything.
Yeah, you had enough to give sacrificially. You had enough to pay for your debts. You had enough to pay for the things that you needed. But it was rather interesting when we kind of got to the bottom of it. You even had money to start knocking off debts one by one. And what did that do for you when you saw it for the first time?
When we looked at the whole picture and saw that in the next 16, 18 months, it could basically virtually be wiped away. It was a huge turning point, I think.
I mean, it was almost like I could see
Yeah.
that burden just coming off of you, like, oh my gosh,
Yeah.
this could really happen.
Yeah.
But that really began the hard work. I mean, it was like a freeing moment right then.
Mm-hmm.
But tell us what happened over the next 2 weeks after that first night, because I mean, it was a spiritual moment. We prayed, we got excited. I mean, it was one of those we're gonna go take the world for Christ and be debt free at the same time kind of thing.
Well, it was interesting because part of the timing with everything, it was like a couple weeks before my birthday too, and so I wanted to start with a fresh year and make a commitment to taking care of an issue that I had been struggling with for a couple of years since I got out of college, and so I thought, new year, fresh start. We're gonna get this knocked out. And I think it was a moment that I realized that I was finally ready to just discipline myself and face what I've been, the rock that I've been chiseling at for a while. So,
but there was an adjustment period too. I mean,
right.
it was difficult. It was, I think I told you, now this is going to be like a wild horse
right.
putting on a saddle for the first time. And it's going to feel uncomfortable. You're going to get blisters. Were there some difficult times in that first 2 to 4 weeks where you had to look at friends and family and say, look, I love you. You don't understand what I'm going through right now, but I'm obedient. What was that like for you?
It was interesting because my mom was like 100% on board. She had gone through the Dave Ramsey, kind of the same thing that we were talking about. But my dad was kind of unsure about the whole thing, and he was like, well, I'm sure you can do it, but it was kind of like hands off. And I knew that if my mom had the confidence in me that I could do it, that was a good thing. And then it was a matter of proving to my dad and to myself that I was capable of doing it. But yeah, the first couple months it was interesting trying to keep track of mainly gas and groceries and spending money and where my money was going. So, but basically I went to my friends though, and as I saw them and just explained to them what was going on, and they were really supportive and were on board, and I just wanted to let them know, where I was going with this and my end goal.
So some people were supportive, and some people, it's not that they were not supportive, like, oh, continue accumulating debt, but they just, this is different. This is living a little radically, because you've cut a lot of, I guess, extra things out of your life in order to accomplish this. And
trying to streamline things, I think.
Yeah, a couple months ago you were considering buying a new car, and you've kind of totally shifted that. Tell us about what that's like for you.
My car is probably, I think, 12 years old, and it's a Subaru, so it gets me around, but it's not the prettiest thing to look at. But and we've had some mechanical issues with it, but we went out car shopping, and we were like fully intending to buy a newer car. And when I sat down and looked at everything and talked to a friend that knows my car pretty well after working on it for so long, decided that it was worth keeping it until I could pay it off, and then start looking after that.
So you're sticking with a car that's not so pretty to look at, but that's actually in more ways than one being a vehicle for you to accomplish this whole financial stewardship calling that God's placed on your life.
Yeah, and living within my means too.
And that's huge. Living within your means, taking the pay that God has provided for you, and saying, this is it. If I can't, and there's, you're normal. It's not like you just got weird all of a sudden.
Right.
There's still things that you desire to have and would like to incorporate into your life, but you just don't have the means for them, and so you just say no.
Right.
And I think it was Matt Chandler that said, discipline, not desire, determines our destiny. And you're whipping that pony. You're going the whole discipline route. You're not wanting to be financially fit any longer.
Okay.
you're making a way for it to happen.
Well, it's a matter of being content where you're at and with what God's given you and where He's placed you. And I think 6 months ago I was not content. Like, well, even maybe even longer than that. But now I can honestly say that in every area I'm content with where God's placed me. So that's
Yeah, because this really has been a culmination of not just financial stewardship, but God's been working in lots of areas in your life, from co-workers to relationships to areas of service and opportunities for mission. I mean, it's been just a beautiful journey coming together. Well, as we think, through the implications for others, tell us how has the Lordship of Christ and the personal relationship with Jesus that you have, how has He really taken control of your money and really given you the strength? The Bible says that we're to be filled by the Spirit of God, and so, I mean, how has Jesus, His relationship to your money, changed in the past 8 to 12 weeks?
Do we want to talk about the move and everything?
No, just tell us whose money it is. Like, okay.
Well, I know where you're going with this, but well, obviously it's God's money. I mean, and He, was given for me to use wisely and to be a good steward of that money. But it came to a point of, I guess, getting rid of the excess and trying to snowball and pay off the debt so that I can in turn use that extra money.
Yeah, because your goal is not to, and I would encourage everybody who's trying to get out of debt, I mean, the goal is not just so you can have more money to spend. I mean, what is your goal in removing debts from your life?
The end goal is to be able to give more and to be able to use it for other needs as I see necessary. Because I feel like as a single woman living on her own or with roommates or whatever, and especially in my job area, like I would rather be able to use that money for someone else that needs it more than I do.
So you're actually talking about learning to live off of less than you make in order to leverage what you make for God's kingdom and His mission.
Right.
Okay. So the mandatory pastor question here. So let's talk about your giving. Do you feel like it's something now that I've got to push to the side, or has this overall plan of discipline really given you that ability?
I think it's definitely helped because, and especially with different changes that I've made in my lifestyle in the past 3 months, I'm going to be able to increase my offering in addition to my offering in addition to my tithe to hopefully start being able to give more now at the same time that I'm paying off the debts as well.
So you're accomplishing all the goals at the same time. That's incredible. Now, a lot of people watching this might say, this is a single college student. She has no major obligations. Her debt to income ratio is well under mine. I have a massive mortgage. I've got multiple cars. I've got massive consumer debt. What can this 20-something really know about my situation? Well, what would you say to them about what God has done in your life? Because we've been in that. I mean, their situation might be theirs, but we know what it feels like to have that foot present on our chest.
Right.
And it didn't matter if it was $9,000, $40,000, or $200,000. I thought I was going to die, So what would you say to those people that are in different life stages than you are, but in the same functional position?
I think it's important to recognize that there are different situations. Unfortunately, I'm in a situation where I don't have, 3 kids and a huge mortgage and 2 brand new cars sitting in the driveway, but I'm able to, based on my means, kind of impact the situation and use my situation, I guess, for good in a way.
And what I would say, you're very humble, and you won't say this, but Jillian has decided she's going to move out of the house that she's in, and you're going to live in a place that's less expensive to accelerate your alleviation of debt and your ability to give. And so it's not just that, you know, your situation might be a little more apt to accomplish your goals. I mean, you're making some hard decisions here. You're keeping a car that you, I mean, on paper, you could afford a car payment, but that would affect everything else. It would affect all your other goals. And so we don't want to let them off the hook too easy, because you're busting it here. I mean,
yeah, I mean, it's kind of a sacrifice moving out, but it's also, I think, a good thing in a way to taking that step to living with other people that I, you know, wouldn't normally have lived with.
right.
But I think it can be good in the long
So
run.
wait, let me go back to that. So you're saying that your pursuit of spiritual stewardship, financial stewardship, that's put you in a position to maybe be more able to share the gospel with a new group of people?
Basically.
That's an interesting idea, isn't it?
Yeah.
That as your life becomes more submitted to Christ, you now have more opportunities to share the gospel itself.
Mm-hmm.
So you sacrificing what is a comfortable place where the oil might be more expensive in the wintertime, but you've got your own place, nobody's coming in. You sacrificing that's going to put you in an environment that at times may be uncomfortable, but it's going to put you around people that need the gospel.
Potentially, yes.
Yeah, that'll help a preacher preach. And so, you know, that's great. And, you know, our encouragement, you know, because really we're part of that same story, is for people not just to pursue that freedom, but to pursue Christ and to give as He gave. Yeah, and so I think that's pretty much it. I mean, that's your story, that's my story, and really, that's everybody's story. The story of the gospel itself is that Christ has given everything for us, and what would we not give for Him? And so, to be a slave to debt only inhibits our ability to give to and for Christ. And so it's my hope that your story, my story, and all of our story encourages others to follow Christ in the days ahead.